Okay, today we're doing a quick sort of a JavaScript overview or a sort of a brief interlude describing how we enhance the function of the website using just a little bit of JavaScript. Should be a quick video. What we're just showing is this was sort of highlighted in the original PHP overview number 2 video. And before we do the other, adding user management and the database interaction on that side, I just want to take like a quick, do a quick shorter video just to describe how we got this function where if you click up, it automatically does a total of the total order. This was not done with PHP, and the reason being is PHP, a lot of what PHP, although it doesn't have to be, it acts on a submission. So there's has to be some sort of form submission for the action to really happen in PHP. This isn't necessarily the case, but often is. And when you submit a form to a website, you don't necessarily have to submit something to make the change happen right away. But JavaScript has a very nice sort of on-click function. And this on-click function, or this on-click listener, which is pretty much persistent in modern-day websites and web browsers, makes it really easy to do this sort of direct interaction. So what we did is we took code which we had modified before. We took the JavaScript tutorial, and that was back with the Java, Python, JavaScript, the converter tool tutorial that was done several months ago. And we took sort of the basic concepts of just doing a basic math function. So I just wanted to walk through that right now. The on-click, what we did is this is a script. So we call this function, which is an abbreviation just for order total. We define 3 variables. So price, result, amount, and in JavaScript you can just define all the variables up front. Same is true for Java. Then we get the variables based on the element ID. And remember, if you went through all the other videos and saw the Python, Java, JavaScript tutorial, there's the get element by ID call. If you get this element by ID, you can essentially in the HTML define anything with an ID tag. Once you define that ID tag, then JavaScript will try to get that value. So what we see here is we're getting the product price, we're getting the amount. We have this result, and it's just multiplying price by amount. And then we get this one more element by ID, and then we say this element is now going to equal the result. So every time we run this function, this order total function, we run this script, so that helps update what we're putting in here. So then we look at the HTML. So on the HTML, we're mapping all of this using the IDs. So we take the, for example, we take the price per pound. So this is giving us the product price. And then on the input side, what we have here, we have this hidden input. We had this hidden input initially for the PHP code, so that the PHP code would also understand this from post and be able to pass it into the next place order function. So if we added 2 and then we added, say, Bob 2 or something, and a shipping address, maybe 2 Bob Lane, place order. It says, thank you, Bob 2. Your order of 2 pounds vanilla roast has been submitted. We'll be in touch soon. So we submitted that. And what we did on the PHP side, if you remember, was we had this hidden input. So we were grabbing this. We were also had this number type input. So we grab this value, and then we have input from this Bob 2 and this 2 Bob Lane, and then we have a hidden input also on the type, so that we know what kind of roast or what kind of product the user ordered. So you can see here we have this hidden product name. So this went to the PHP. We have this input type hidden. We have the name product price. But we also have this ID product price, and this ID allows the JavaScript to then get product by ID. So not only do we have a name, but we also include this ID value over here. So once we define an ID here, then on the input number, which is the amount, we also have this ID, which is amount. And then what we do is we call through JavaScript this onClick function, and we say onClick every time I click the order amount on this input. Every time I click up or down or whatever, please run the JavaScript function order total. Okay, so then that runs this function order total, and that's what allows us to call these values and then do the calculation. So what you see here, every time we run this, is because we have this onClick call, so every time this is clicked, we're going to run the function, and then it updates the value in real time. And that's one of the nice things about JavaScript. So JavaScript and PHP, they work together. This is just sort of like a quick proof of why you can't just programming language, particularly for web design. You have to have HTML, CSS, JavaScript, PHP. All these tools work together to make for a better functioning website. The final piece that we call is we have this one order total, which is this output. Now, one thing I did want to mention and I wanted to highlight, I did have some trouble actually getting this to work at first. And it turns out that if you try to put an ID in for a text cell or a cell in a table, this TD column, JavaScript just doesn't like it very much. It has trouble finding the ID. It gets like either an undefined value or it can't pull in the name. So especially if you have anything where there's maybe like an input available, always put the ID with the input. That helps make sure that JavaScript is working off the same sort of space and the same values. And oftentimes, because in the input you're either defining the value or you're showing a value to begin with, then JavaScript has no problem, updating itself and then getting the related value for what's defined uh, in this input field. So um, whenever possible, if you have an input field and you need to pass something to JavaScript, make sure that the ID for what you're getting in the elements is defined by this input field. And then when you're doing the output, it could be a div, it could be other things. But ideally, for anything which is going into the JavaScript, make sure that it's inside of an input field. So what we do is at the end, we just get document element by ID. So find where we're calling this output ID, and then we're passing some inner HTML, and then we're saying that this new field, we're updating the information with result, and result is the variable, which is price times amount. So given that little bit of code, we're able to pass this through so that we can actually get this working function and show order totals in real time. You could add to this if you wanted to do something like if there was like state tax or local tax. You could add that into the functionality. You could just define like a tax variable and multiply by tax, something like that. But this is just a very short and very quick way of enhancing usability. And I felt when I was initially designing this page that showing the total of the order to the user was much better for the overall flow of the website when you're doing sort of an order flow. So wrote a little bit of code, spent a little bit of time on it, and really the one trick that I had to sort of work out through both Googling on the internet and then also playing with the code for about an hour or so was make sure that the ID is included in the input type or in the input field rather than say like in a TD column or somewhere else in the text. So really short video. Just wanted to throw it out there. A little break from the PHP progression that we're sort of doing right at the moment. But I hope it's helpful, and thank you very much.